Welcome to Lessons with Lenski on Language. Enjoy these memes, have a laugh before we get into language. If you can't understand the one on the right, look up what soy means. It means I am. Pretty funny stuff. Alright, so where are languages distributed? I'm going to go over what language is to start off. Okay, so a language is a system of communication through speech, a collection of sounds that a group of people understands to have the same meaning. And in those traditions of literature and language, you need to write it one of three ways. Alphabetic, like we use in English, where each character represents one sound. So K is K, alright? Syllabic, which is each character represents one syllable, that is Korean. Ideogrammatic and ideographic, and I'll show you an example of those in the next slide. And each character represents one word or concept. So you might have one character that represents the word mother or cat or cow. All right, so it's not going to be a collection of sounds or syllables. It's going to be just one character. So here on the bottom, you can see that many countries designate one official language to be used for official documents and public objects. So that could be road signs and money. If you had different road signs in different languages, you could have a lot of accidents and issues. So picking one official language will basically eliminate any issues with communication around the major language spoken in that country. Moving on, like I said, here are some Chinese or Mandarin ideograms: sun, person, white, clear, big, heaven, so on and so forth, and they represent concepts more than sounds. Okay. As it says on the bottom, two basic characters, so down here, can represent or build a more complex word. All right. So daytime, white person. Okay. So this meaning light or clear, this meaning person. But you take the big out of that, and it's just person, all right? The big would be the arms extended, which means that they are bigger, okay? So yeah, that's how you figure out how to say white people in Mandarin. Classifications of language. The world's languages are organized into three, and these are our trunk, our branches, and our leaves, okay? So language families, a collection of languages related through a common ancestral language. Branches are a collection of languages within a family that are related through a common ancestral language. Differences are not as significant or as old as between the families, okay? So relatively new. All right, and then language groups, a collection of languages within that branch that share a common origin in relatively recent past, or display a similar grammar or vocabulary. So this would be, Sino-Tibetan. This could be, and then this would be down here a leaf such as Mandarin or English. Okay. So classification of language. Right here are some good statistics. So 2/3 of the world's population speak a language that belong to the Indo-European, which is the trunk of English, or Sino-Tibetan, which is the trunk of Chinese. So 2/3 of the world's population speak one of the branch and leaves of those two languages, and that tells us a lot because Mandarin and English and Spanish will be the three largest languages spoken. 2 to 6% of the world's population speak a language that fits into one of the 7 other language families. So not that many other people in the world speak something other than languages that come out of Indo-European or Sino-Tibetan. That is why we are concentrating heavily on that, but it doesn't mean that we can just ignore the 2 to 6%. On the bottom, the remainder of populations speak a language belonging to more than 100 smaller families. That's incredible. I mean, there are almost 900 some languages out there in the world today. But that means there's different little, a split from like northern France to southern France and the different languages that are spoken. So, it's important to know that there are a lot of languages out there other than the popular ones that we know today. So here are some of the language trees that we saw. I'm not going to hover on this too much. You guys should be able to identify some of the larger leaves and branches and trunks. Please don't memorize everything, especially if you're not taking the AP test. We will review this and maybe come up with some sort of way of memorizing the branches and the leaves, but don't stress. So the distribution of language family. So you should be able to tell me for Indo-European language, you should be able to know that they are found in Europe, South Asia, North America, and Latin America. All right, so that's just, you should know, if we're talking about Indo-European, you should know those 4 countries are synonymous with that. Sino-Tibetan, you should know that this is obviously in Southeast Asia and China. All right, no single Chinese language. Mandarin is the most used language in the world and the official language of both the People's Republic of China and something that is hidden of Taiwan. All right. So, moving on. So, languages of Southwest Asia, North Africa, and Central Asia. You guys should know these. These are some of the other big ones. So, Afro-Asiatic, that's where Arabic is going to come into. Altaic, that's going to be a lot of the speakers in Turkey. So just know that for those 2 families. Moving on to African language families, Niger-Congo, know that Swahili comes out of this. First language of 800,000 people, the official language of Tanzania, and spoken by 30 million Africans, okay? So just know that Swahili is probably the biggest, but in African language culture, there's more than 1,000 distinct languages that have been documented. So there are a lot out there. Most lack this written tradition, but they're spoken. That doesn't mean they don't exist, although languages do die off. But Swahili, guys, please know this. Moving on to key issue 2, why is English related to other languages? So, pretty big concept to understand, the distribution of Indo-European languages. So the Germanic branch, this is where we're going to start. So these branches are going to be split into 2 groups, North and West Germanic. So West Germanic is going to be split into high and low subgroups. High is going to be spoken in southern mountains of Germany and forms more on the standard German language. And then Low Germanic is going to be English, Dutch in the Netherlands and Belgium, Flemish, and Afrikaans in South Africa. North Germanic language is spoken in Scandinavia, which is Swedish, Danish, Icelandic, and Norwegian. All 4 of these languages derive from this language of Old Norse, which is an old language affiliated with the Vikings. You guys really don't need to know that. Moving on. So, distribution of Indo-European languages. So, Indo-Iranian branch, spoken primarily in South Asia, and most speakers, so I'm not quite sure what just happened with the Screencastify, but I'm going to pick up here the distribution of Indo-European language, Balto-Slavic branch, spoken primarily in Eastern Europe and divided into East Slavic and Baltic Slavic and West and South Slavic groups. Okay, you guys should know some of those details that are listed below. They're not key details, but they just give you a point of reference when you know where those languages are. So moving on to the Romance branch, these aren't sexy languages. These are languages that were coming out of Rome, okay? And these are spoken primarily in southwestern Europe and Latin countries. And most widely used are the languages of Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Italian. You guys did do this on a map of where these languages are spoken, so refer to that. These are some maps that you guys did already. And here we go with the origin and diffusion of language families. So we're going to get to the spreading and the creation of the English language. So modern English has evolved primarily from the groups spoken by three Germanic tribes, the Angles, the Jutes, and the Saxons, each from a different area. And over time, others invaded England and their language influenced the basic English. Vikings from present-day Norway and Normans from present-day Normandy in France spoke French. And that is going to influence the language here. And I'm just going to show you guys a map and reference this. So the first speakers of the language here that became known as English were tribes in present-day Germany and Denmark, like I just said, right here. So they moved over here, and these were called the Angles, then the Angles land, and then England. Oops, my bad. So after the invasions of Vikings in the 9th century and Normans in the 11th century, they brought new words to the spoken language. So you can see down up on top here, not down. You're going to see from Norway people coming down, and then the Vikings in the 9th century coming from Norway right here, and that's where we have the English language stemming from. So, origin and diffusion of language families. English diffuses across the world. That is absolutely the case in the world because of globalization. But diffusion to North America, I'm going to skip down here, is that this really came to North America through Jamestown, which originated from the British. But when we sent people over to Jamestown, that's when English was introduced to North America. All right, I'm not going to go into the details here, but just know that's really how English came here. Went through that. And this is two theories you guys should know of how Indo-European languages became a thing. Okay, so there are two theories: the nomadic warrior, the Kurgan hypothesis, and the sedentary farmer, or the Anatolian hypothesis. And let me explain this to you guys a little bit. So this is the Kurgan hearth over here, and what they're saying is that the language was spread from this area from 4,000 to 5,000 BC, and then spread a little further here from 3,000 to 4,000, the other way, 5,000, 4,000, 4,000 to 3,000, and then spread out here through 3,000 to 2,000 BC. However, there's sedentary farmer Anatolian hypothesis, where this is the hearth of the Indo-European language that we know, and it is spreading east and west. All right, and what they're saying is this was actually started a lot further back, and I think this is actually the most prevalent hypothesis, but don't quote me on that. So, trying to wrap up here, why do individual languages vary in many places? We heard about this in dialects. You guys can take the notes here. Dialects in England, they're all over. British and American dialects, we talked about this. And distinguishing between languages and dialects, we talked about this as well. So for key issue 4, I don't have much time left. Basically what you guys should know is that Spanish is on the rise for predominance in the world, and English is by far one of the most widely spoken language in our country and in foreign countries, and know that it diffuses rapidly. That's it. Thank you. Let me know if you have questions.